The Shadow in the Corner. Before we begin this extraordinary journey, I invite you to hit that subscribe button. What you're about to discover will challenge everything you think you know about strength, identity, and redemption. This isn't just a story, it's a lesson in human resilience that might change how you see your own potential. In the concrete corridors of Oak Ridge Federal Penitentiary, invisibility became an art form. The janitor moved through the cell blocks like morning fog, present yet unnoticed, substantial yet ignored. His mop traced wet arcs across linoleum floors, while conversations continued around him as though he were merely furniture. For 18 months, he had perfected this disappearing act, becoming part of the institutional landscape. Unremarkable, forgettable, safe. His name tag read Marcus Webb, though few inmates bothered to read it. They saw only the gray uniform, the cleaning cart, the downcast eyes. In a world where reputation meant survival, he had cultivated the appearance of insignificance. While others strutted and postured, marking territory through aggression and alliance, Marcus simply cleaned. He emptied trash bins, scrubbed toilets, mopped up the daily evidence of confined humanity. His movements were economical, precise, almost meditative. The guards appreciated his quietness. Unlike the regular inmates, Marcus never complained, never caused disruptions, never required discipline. He arrived for his shifts punctually, completed his work thoroughly, and returned to his solitary cell without incident. In the administrative paperwork, he existed as a model of rehabilitation, a low-security trustee earning reduced time through exemplary behavior. But beneath this carefully constructed facade, something more complex breathed and waited. Marcus possessed a quality that prison rarely witnessed: genuine patience. While others counted days with desperate urgency, he moved through time with deliberate purpose. Each morning, he rose before the general population, performed a series of stretches that resembled yoga, then reported to the maintenance supervisor for his assignments. His routine never varied. Predictability, he understood, was camouflage. The younger inmates occasionally tested him with casual cruelty: a deliberately kicked mop bucket, trash thrown at his feet, crude jokes about his subservience. Marcus absorbed these provocations like stone absorbing rain, his expression unchanging, his movements uninterrupted. He would simply clean whatever mess they created, then continue his rounds. This response frustrated his tormentors. Without reaction, their power evaporated into meaninglessness. What none of them recognized was that Marcus's stillness wasn't weakness. It was discipline forged through years of training most couldn't imagine. Every ignored insult, every unacknowledged provocation, every moment of manufactured invisibility represented a choice. He was practicing an ancient art, the strategic surrender of ego in service of survival. In a kingdom of peacocks, he had chosen to become a sparrow, and in that choice lay a wisdom that would soon reveal its profound implications. The FBI's weekly bulletin arrived on a Thursday morning, changing everything. The bulletin. If you're finding value in this narrative, please take a moment to like this chapter and share it with someone who appreciates stories of quiet strength. Your engagement helps more people discover these lessons in unexpected resilience. Special Agent Sarah Chen placed her coffee on the warden's desk, her expression carrying the weight of urgent complexity. Warden Thompson looked up from his morning reports, immediately recognizing the tension in her posture. Federal agents didn't make unannounced visits for routine matters. The manila folder she carried bore the distinctive red classification stripe that signaled something significant had entered his carefully managed world. "We have a situation," Chen began, sliding a photograph across the polished wood. "This man is currently housed in your facility." Thompson studied the image, a younger face, perhaps 15 years previous, with harder edges and different eyes. Yet something in the bone structure, the set of the jaw, registered with uncomfortable familiarity. He reached for his facility roster, fingers tracing down the alphabetized list, while his mind worked through the implications of federal interest. The janitor? Thompson's surprise escaped before professional neutrality could contain it. Marcus Webb? He's been model perfect. Not a single incident report. Chen's tablet illuminated with additional documentation. His real name is Michael Castellano. Former intelligence operative, military background we can't fully disclose. Wanted for questioning regarding events in Eastern Europe 7 years ago. He disappeared from federal custody during a transfer 3 years ago and successfully created this identity. Somehow, he arranged his own incarceration here under an assumed name, serving time for a minor embezzlement charge that we now believe he manufactured specifically to enter this facility. The warden felt his ordered universe tilting. In 23 years managing correctional institutions, he had developed sophisticated instincts for deception. Inmates lied constantly, about innocence, about connections, about capabilities. Yet Marcus had presented no false bravado, made no suspicious claims, demonstrated nothing requiring deeper scrutiny. He was, by every measurable standard, precisely what he appeared to be. A middle-aged man serving minimal time for white-collar crime, using janitorial work to reduce his sentence. "What's his objective here?" Thompson asked, already mentally reviewing security protocols and potential vulnerabilities. Chen's expression suggested complexities beyond simple explanation. "We're not entirely certain. His psychological profile indicates extreme tactical intelligence. He doesn't act without strategic purpose. The question isn't whether he's planning something. It's what and when. Men with his training don't simply vanish into prison systems for rehabilitation. This placement was deliberate, which means Oak Ridge contains something or someone he considers valuable enough to risk years of confinement." The implications cascaded through Thompson's mind. His facility housed 1,200 inmates across multiple security classifications. Among them were financial criminals, drug traffickers, corrupt officials, and various individuals whose crimes involved information rather than violence. Any of them could represent Castellano's target, or conversely, his protection. Intelligence operatives sometimes disappeared into the system to safeguard witnesses, to gather evidence, or to position themselves near targets civilian law enforcement couldn't touch. "What do you need from me?" Thompson asked. "Continued ignorance," Chen replied. "For now." The Observer. Before we continue, I encourage you to reflect on someone in your own life whom you might have underestimated. Sometimes the quietest people carry the most profound capabilities. Subscribe to ensure you don't miss the revelation that's building toward an unforgettable conclusion. Michael Castellano. Still Marcus Webb to everyone around him. Maintained his routine with disciplined precision. The federal presence had been subtle but noticeable to someone trained in surveillance detection. Special Agent Chen had visited the warden's office. Security cameras, normally passive, now tracked with slightly increased attention. Guard rotations shifted minutely, creating additional coverage in areas he frequented. These adjustments told him everything. His cover, maintained through 21 months of meticulous performance, had developed complications. Yet his expression betrayed nothing as he pushed his cleaning cart through B Block. The morning population stirred with its usual rhythm: card games, conversations, the small negotiations that structured confined existence. Marcus moved among them like background music, present but unheard, seen but unobserved. He had studied the dynamics here with the same analytical precision he once applied to foreign intelligence targets, mapping the invisible architecture of power and alliance that governed daily life. In prison, status flowed through predictable channels. Physical dominance established initial hierarchy. Contraband access refined it. Strategic alliances stabilized it. And information, knowledge of weaknesses, secrets, vulnerabilities, became the currency of ultimate power. Marcus had accumulated significant information simply by being perpetually dismissed. People spoke freely around janitors, revealing details they would carefully guard from peers. He knew which guards were having affairs, which inmates were informants, which seemingly powerful figures were actually drowning in gambling debts they couldn't repay. This intelligence wasn't collected accidentally. Marcus had entered Oak Ridge with specific objectives, though even he acknowledged the plan's audacious complexity. His target resided 3 cell blocks away in protective custody, a former accountant named David Brennan who possessed information about offshore financial networks that funded terrorist organizations. Brennan had turned federal witness, then recanted under pressure from the very people he had betrayed. Now he sat in legal limbo, too dangerous to release, too valuable to abandon, too terrified to speak. The official intelligence community had exhausted conventional approaches. Brennan wouldn't respond to plea negotiations, protection offers, or legal pressure. He had retreated into traumatized silence, convinced that cooperation meant death regardless of official assurances. So Michael Castellano had volunteered for an unprecedented operation: infiltrate the prison system, gain Brennan's trust through proximity and patience, extract the information that traditional methods couldn't access. 21 months of invisibility had positioned him perfectly. As a trusty janitor, he had legitimate access to protective custody units. His exemplary behavior had earned supervisor confidence and minimal oversight. He cleaned Brennan's corridor twice weekly, gradually establishing a presence that registered as safe precisely because it seemed so powerless and unthreatening. But federal interest now complicated everything. If they moved overtly, Brennan would recognize the manipulation and retreat further into silence. If they pulled Marcus out, the operation collapsed entirely. The delicate architecture of trust he had constructed through patient, unremarkable presence would evaporate overnight. He needed time, perhaps another 6 weeks, to complete the careful psychological groundwork necessary for Brennan to finally speak. Marcus emptied a trash bin, his movements unhurried, his eyes tracking details most never noticed. A crumpled note here, a carefully positioned object there. The small signals through which prison communicated its hidden business. He understood now that his greatest challenge wouldn't be extraction or escape. It would be maintaining invisibility long enough to complete a mission that demanded remaining unremarkable, while federal agents worked to do precisely the opposite. The disruption. If this story resonates with you, please engage with a like and comment. Your thoughts matter, and this community grows stronger when we share insights about resilience and unexpected strength. Now, let's explore what happens when careful plans meet unpredictable chaos. The disruption arrived not from federal agents, but from an entirely unexpected direction. Tommy Rizzo had been transferred to Oak Ridge 3 days earlier, a mid-level organized crime enforcer whose violent reputation preceded him like atmospheric pressure before a storm. He was young, perhaps 28, with the particular swagger of men who had learned early that intimidation opened doors force couldn't reach. His arrival shifted the cell block's dynamics immediately, creating subtle realignments as existing power structures adjusted to accommodate this new element. Marcus noted these changes with professional interest but maintained his strategic distance. Rizzo represented the kind of chaos that complicated operational security. Men like him needed to establish dominance quickly in new environments, which meant inevitable confrontations, displays of power, and disrupted routines. The wisest approach was simple avoidance: remain invisible, present no challenge, offer no reason for attention. Unfortunately, invisibility sometimes provoked exactly what it sought to avoid. Marcus was cleaning the recreation area when Rizzo's voice carried across the space with deliberate volume. "Yo, janitor, you missed a spot." The tone carried layers of meaning beyond the words: testing, provoking, establishing hierarchy through casual disrespect. Around them, conversations diminished as attention shifted toward potential conflict. Prison thrived on entertainment, and challenges offered rare variation from monotonous routine. Marcus continued his work without acknowledgement, mop moving in steady arcs. The non-response was calculated, neither submission nor defiance, simply continuation of task. This approach had diffused countless previous provocations by offering nothing for aggressive energy to grip. Most provocateurs eventually lost interest when their target refused to validate the interaction. Rizzo, however, possessed the particular persistence of someone whose identity depended on never backing down. He crossed the recreation area deliberately, positioning himself directly in Marcus's path. "You deaf, old man? I'm talking to you." Marcus paused, meeting Rizzo's eyes with an expression of mild inquiry rather than challenge. "Sorry, didn't hear you. I'll get that spot." His voice carried no submission, no fear, no aggression, just neutral acknowledgement. He began to redirect his mop toward a non-existent mark on the floor, using movement to deflect confrontation. But Rizzo had already committed to the interaction before an audience. Backing down now would cost status he couldn't afford to lose in his first week. His hand shot out, gripping Marcus's shoulder with aggressive force. "When I talk to you, you stop what you're doing and pay attention. Understand?" The cell block held its breath. Guards watched from their stations, assessing whether intervention was necessary or whether this would resolve itself through the established social mechanisms that governed inmate interactions. Marcus felt the familiar tactical calculations flowing through his mind. Angles, leverage points, vulnerable targets. Rizzo's grip, meant to intimidate, actually provided excellent control for several techniques that could end this confrontation in seconds. But ending it violently would shatter everything. Marcus Webb, the invisible janitor, wouldn't possess combat capabilities. Revealing them would raise questions that led directly to exposure. So Michael Castellano made the hardest choice available. He did nothing. His shoulder remained beneath Rizzo's grip, his posture unchanged, his expression carrying only patient neutrality. "I understand," he said quietly. Rizzo released him with a dismissive shove, having achieved the public dominance he sought. Marcus resumed cleaning while laughter and resumed conversation filled the recreation area. To observers, the interaction confirmed existing hierarchies, another example of the weak submitting to the strong. No one recognized it as the most sophisticated tactical decision in the room. The pressure. Your continued engagement keeps the story alive. If you're invested in discovering how quiet strength prevails against mounting pressure, please subscribe and share. What unfolds next reveals the true cost of maintaining invisible power. The interaction with Rizzo created exactly the complication Marcus had spent 21 months avoiding. Word spread through the cell block with the efficiency of networked systems. The janitor had backed down, submitted publicly, demonstrated weakness. In the brutal economy of prison status, this assessment marked him as vulnerable, someone whose possessions, privileges, and person could be exploited without consequence. Within 48 hours, 3 separate inmates had borrowed items from his cleaning cart without asking. His toilet paper ration disappeared. Someone deliberately spilled food on freshly mopped floors just to watch him clean it again. Marcus absorbed each provocation with the same measured calm, recognizing them as inevitable consequences of his strategic choice. Defending himself would have cost more than enduring disrespect. Yet the pressure accumulated like water against a dam, each small indignity adding to structural stress that eventually demanded release. He found himself performing breathing exercises in his cell at night, managing physiological responses his training had taught him to control, but never eliminate. Patience was a muscle, and even well-conditioned muscles experienced fatigue under sustained load. The real concern wasn't personal discomfort, it was mission integrity. David Brennan, his target in protective custody, was showing signs of increased willingness to engage. Their brief interactions during corridor cleaning had evolved from wary silence to cautious acknowledgement to, most recently, a moment of genuine connection when Marcus had quietly mentioned that he too understood what it meant to be afraid. That breakthrough had required months of careful positioning, and now it teetered on the edge of significant progress. But Brennan heard things even in protective custody. Guards talked, inmates communicated through the elaborate networks that connected isolated populations. If word reached him that Marcus was being victimized, it would undermine the subtle authority Marcus had projected, not dominance, but rather quiet capability and trustworthiness. Brennan wouldn't confide in someone he perceived as weak or vulnerable to manipulation by other inmates. The dilemma deepened when Special Agent Chen requested another meeting through the warden's office. Marcus understood the message's implications immediately. Federal impatience was growing. They wanted results, wanted confirmation of his operational viability, wanted something to justify the unconventional approach they had sanctioned. But intelligence work didn't accommodate artificial timelines. Trust developed at its own pace, particularly with someone as traumatized as Brennan. Marcus maintained his routine with even greater discipline, using structure as anchor against mounting pressure. Morning stretches, breakfast, work assignment, lunch, afternoon cleaning, dinner, evening reflection. Each element served dual purpose, practical necessity and psychological stabilization. The meditation practices he had developed during military training weren't mystical exercises but concrete tools for managing stress physiology and maintaining cognitive clarity under duress. During his Tuesday shift in protective custody, Brennan spoke unprompted for the first time. "You always so calm?" The question emerged with genuine curiosity rather than mockery. Marcus paused his mopping, considering his response with the care it deserved. This was the moment missions depended on, the opening where authentic connection either established itself or dissolved into missed opportunity. "Being upset doesn't change what I can control," he replied simply. "I found it's better to accept what is and work with it." Brennan studied him with new attention. "Most guys here are angry all the time. About being locked up, about what they lost, about who betrayed them. The words carried weight beyond casual observation. They were confession disguised as commentary, revealing the emotional architecture of his own experience. "Anger's expensive," Marcus said, returning to his work but maintaining the conversation through tone and pacing. "Costs energy, costs focus, costs peace. I don't have enough of any of those to waste them on what I can't change." The conversation ended there, but its significance resonated beyond the brief exchange. Brennan had revealed his psychological framework: betrayal, loss, anger. Marcus had offered an alternative perspective, grounded in acceptance rather than resistance. Seeds planted in careful soil, now requiring only patience and continued cultivation. But that patience depended on maintaining his operational cover long enough for trust to solidify into genuine disclosure. The escalation. Before we continue this crucial chapter, I ask you to pause and consider: how do we respond when pushed beyond our limits? Please subscribe to witness a masterclass in strategic restraint that challenges conventional notions of strength. Tommy Rizzo's attention, unfortunately, wasn't satisfied by a single public victory. Having established Marcus as an acceptable target, he returned with increasing frequency, each interaction designed to extract additional entertainment from the janitor's perpetual non-resistance. The provocations escalated methodically. Verbal mockery evolved into casual physical contact, accidental collisions that conveyed deliberate disrespect. Marcus weathered each incident with unchanged composure, recognizing them as tests he couldn't afford to fail by responding. But Rizzo, lacking the satisfaction of reaction, began to push harder. During lunch service, he deliberately knocked Marcus's tray to the floor, scattering food across the cafeteria tiles. "Oops," he announced with theatrical innocence. "Better clean that up, janitor. That's what you're good for, right?" The cafeteria erupted in laughter while Marcus knelt to collect the scattered meal, his expression neutral, his movements unhurried. The guards watched but didn't intervene. Prison culture required them to distinguish between harassment and genuine violence, maintaining authority while allowing social structures to self-regulate within acceptable parameters. A spilled lunch didn't warrant official response, particularly when the target showed no indication of distress. Marcus understood their reasoning even as frustration accumulated in his chest like compressed air seeking release. That evening, alone in his cell, he performed 100 push-ups, not for fitness, but for physiological regulation. The physical exertion provided outlet for emotional pressure his public persona couldn't accommodate. Sweat and burning muscles translated psychological stress into manageable physical sensation, an ancient technique warriors had employed for millennia. When he finally lay on his narrow bunk, breathing normalized and heart rate steady, he acknowledged an uncomfortable truth. This situation was approaching unsustainability. The following day brought a new complication. As Marcus cleaned the corridor near Brennan's protective custody cell, he found a folded note tucked beneath his cleaning cart's spray bottle. The paper was standard issue, easily torn from the notebooks commissary sold, with handwriting that suggested education and anxiety in equal measure. "They're saying you're weak." "Are you really someone I can trust?" Marcus felt the mission slipping through his fingers like water. Brennan's question cut directly to the operational core. Trust couldn't coexist with perceived weakness in an environment where strength determined survival. Yet revealing his capabilities would expose his cover, triggering federal intervention that would end any possibility of genuine connection. He was trapped between competing necessities, each demanding contradictory actions. He responded the only way possible, writing carefully on the note's reverse side. "Strength isn't what people think it is. Real power is choosing your battles and not fighting the ones that don't matter. Think about what matters to you." He folded the note and, during his next pass through protective custody, slipped it through Brennan's food slot while delivering afternoon supplies. But the exchange, however meaningful, didn't resolve his immediate problem. That afternoon, Rizzo cornered him in the supply closet, a location deliberately chosen for its isolation from oversight. Two of Rizzo's associates blocked the doorway, while Rizzo himself approached with the particular casual confidence of someone anticipating easy domination. "I've decided you're going to give me half your commissary every week," Rizzo announced, his tone suggesting negotiation was merely performative. "Consider it protection money. Keep you safe from the rougher guys in here." The irony of the statement hung thick in the confined space. Rizzo himself represented the primary threat he claimed to offer protection from. Marcus set down his cleaning supplies with deliberate care, buying seconds to consider tactical options. Every choice here carried consequences extending beyond this moment. Submission would cement his appearance of weakness, but maintain his cover. Resistance would expose capabilities he couldn't afford to reveal. Compromise would suggest negotiability, inviting future extortion. And violence would end everything he had built. "I don't think that's going to work for me," Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying neither aggression nor fear, just simple statement of position. The response wasn't defiance exactly, but it wasn't submission either. It was something more subtle, boundary establishment without dominance display. Rizzo's expression shifted, surprise mixing with irritation. This wasn't the script he had anticipated. "You think you have a choice here, old man?" "Everyone has choices," Marcus replied. "The question is whether they're willing to live with the consequences." He met Rizzo's eyes with calm directness, neither challenging nor avoiding. The breaking point. What you're about to read represents a pivotal moment in understanding true power. If you value insights into human psychology and strategic thinking, please like this chapter and subscribe. The transformation you're about to witness redefines strength itself. The tension in the supply closet crystallized into decision point. Rizzo's face flushed with the particular anger of someone whose expectations had been violated. In his world, resistance from designated victims represented intolerable challenge requiring immediate correction. His hand moved toward Marcus's chest, prepared to enforce submission through escalating physicality. What happened next occurred in the space between heartbeats, compressed time where training superseded conscious thought. Marcus's left hand intercepted Rizzo's wrist with precise control, fingers positioning on nerve clusters that sent involuntary signals through neural pathways. His right hand moved to Rizzo's elbow, creating leverage that rotated the joint toward its structural limit. The technique was invisible to casual observation, but unmistakable to anyone who understood human kinetics. Rizzo found himself immobilized without fully comprehending how it had occurred. Marcus held the position for exactly 3 seconds, long enough to demonstrate capability, short enough to avoid injury. Then he released, stepping back with hands open and non-threatening. "I don't want problems with you," he said quietly. "But I won't be paying protection, and I won't be pushed anymore. Find someone else." Rizzo stared at him with a new expression, confusion mixing with nascent respect and residual anger. The interaction had revealed something unexpected, a hidden dimension to the janitor's carefully constructed invisibility. Around them, Rizzo's associates shifted uncertainly, recognizing that dynamics had changed in ways they couldn't fully articulate. For a long moment, the outcome balanced on the edge of violence or understanding. Then Rizzo laughed. Not mockery, but genuine amusement at finding surprise where he'd expected monotony. "Where the hell did a janitor learn to do that?" The question carried curiosity rather than hostility, seeking understanding rather than confrontation. Marcus considered his response carefully. This moment would define their future relationship and, by extension, his operational viability. "Military long time ago," he offered, staying close enough to truth to be believable. "Learned some things, tried to forget them. Guess I remembered when necessary." The explanation satisfied Rizzo's need for narrative coherence. Military backgrounds were common enough in prison populations to seem plausible, and the detail about trying to forget aligned with Marcus's subsequent presentation as someone who had deliberately walked away from violence. "Why didn't you use that before?" Rizzo asked, his tone suggesting the question mattered to him. "Because I didn't need to," Marcus replied simply. "You spilling my lunch doesn't require me to hurt anyone. You trying to extort me, that's different. That's worth drawing a line." Rizzo absorbed this distinction, his expression suggesting something unexpected. Approval. In a world where most men responded to every slight with disproportionate violence or submitted entirely to avoid conflict, Marcus's calibrated response represented rare sophistication. He had demonstrated capability without escalating unnecessarily, set boundaries without destroying relationship possibilities, and shown restraint that suggested confidence rather than fear. All right, Janitor, Rizzo said finally. No problems between us. You keep cleaning. I'll keep my crew from bothering you. But, his expression sharpened. Don't think you can do that move on me again. I'll be ready. Marcus allowed himself a small smile. Fair enough. Hopefully we won't need to find out. The exchange ended there, the supply closet's tension dissipating as Rizzo and his associates departed. Marcus stood alone, breathing deliberately to manage the adrenaline spike his physiology had generated despite his controlled exterior. He had crossed a line he'd spent 21 months avoiding, revealed capabilities that couldn't be unrevealed. The invisibility that had protected his mission had cracked, and he couldn't predict what consequences would flow through that opening. But perhaps, he considered, absolute invisibility had never been sustainable. Perhaps the mission required evolution, adapting to circumstances that defied original planning. Brennan needed to trust someone with genuine strength, not someone who merely appeared helpless. Maybe revealing measured capability actually advanced his operational objectives, rather than compromising them. That evening, another note appeared in his cleaning cart. I saw what happened today. Word travels fast in here. Maybe you're exactly who I've been looking for. Can we talk? The conversation. We're approaching the heart of this transformation. Please take a moment to like and share this chapter. Your engagement helps others discover stories that illuminate the complexity of human courage. Now, witness the conversation that changes everything. The conversation occurred 3 days later during Marcus's routine cleaning shift in protective custody. This time, instead of brief exchanges through careful timing, the guard discreetly extended his break, providing a 15-minute window where Marcus and Brennan could speak with relative privacy. The arrangement suggested someone, likely Special Agent Chen, had quietly facilitated this opportunity, recognizing that organic development had reached critical juncture. Brennan sat on his bunk, hands clasped between his knees, posture carrying the weight of sustained fear and difficult decision. He was 42, though stress had aged him beyond those years, with gray threading prematurely through his hair and deep lines bracketing his mouth. His eyes held the particular wariness of someone who had trusted before and paid devastating prices. I've been watching you, Brennan began without preamble. Not just recently, since you started working this corridor 8 months ago. You're different from the others. Quieter, more contained. Like you're always thinking 3 moves ahead. Marcus continued his cleaning with unhurried movements, understanding that appearing too eager would undermine the delicate trust Brennan was offering. Prison teaches patience, he replied. Rush things here, you make mistakes. I prefer to avoid mistakes. The thing with Rizzo, Brennan continued, his voice dropping to near whisper despite their relative isolation. Everyone's talking about it. How you let him push you for weeks, then suddenly showed him you could have stopped at any time. That took real discipline. Most guys either fight immediately or never fight at all. You waited until the exact right moment. Marcus paused his mopping, recognizing the conversation's trajectory. Brennan wasn't making casual observation. He was revealing his analytical framework, demonstrating that he understood tactical patience because he had employed it himself. This was the breakthrough Marcus had cultivated through months of careful positioning. Sometimes the right moment finds you, Marcus said carefully. The key is being ready when it arrives. Brennan stood, pacing the small cell with compressed energy. I know who you are, he said suddenly, the words tumbling out with the force of confession. Not your name, not your specific history, but I know you're not really a janitor serving time for embezzlement. You're too controlled, too aware. You're here for a reason, and I think that reason is me. Marcus felt the mission shift beneath him like tectonic plates realigning. Brennan had seen through his cover, not completely, but enough to recognize intentional placement. The question now was whether that recognition would provoke retreat or enable connection. He made a calculated decision, acknowledge truth partially rather than maintain pretense completely. You're right, Marcus admitted, setting down his mop and facing Brennan directly. I'm here intentionally. But not to hurt you or manipulate you. I'm here because the conventional approach has failed. You stopped trusting federal agents, stopped believing in protection, stopped thinking cooperation was survivable. So someone had to become something different. Someone who earned trust through time and consistency, rather than promises and threats. Brennan's expression cycled through multiple emotions. Vindication at his suspicions being confirmed, fear at what confirmation meant, and something else harder to name. Relief, perhaps, at finally confronting what he had suspected but couldn't verify. "Why should I trust you now?" he asked. "You've been lying this whole time." "Have I?" Marcus countered gently. "I never claimed to be anyone other than who I presented. I cleaned floors, kept to myself, treated everyone with respect. Those things were real. The identity was constructed, yes, but the person you've observed, patient, disciplined, unwilling to abuse power even when possessing it, that's genuine. I could have manipulated you overtly, pressured you, threatened you. Instead, I spent 21 months being someone worth trusting." Brennan sat down slowly, processing this distinction. "What do you want from me?" "The same thing everyone wants," Marcus replied honestly. "Information about the financial networks you administered. Names, account structures, transfer protocols. The intelligence that can dismantle funding streams for operations that kill innocent people. But here's what's different. I'm not demanding it, and I'm not pretending you won't face risks by providing it. I'm simply offering you the option to trust someone who has demonstrated, through sustained action rather than empty promises, that they operate with integrity." The silence that followed held profound weight. The decision. As we approach the culmination of this journey, I invite you to reflect on the relationships in your own life built through patient consistency. Please subscribe and engage. Your participation creates community around stories that matter. Now, let's witness the moment when trust transforms into action. David Brennan had spent 3 years drowning in fear, trapped between competing terrors that offered no escape route. Cooperating with federal authorities meant betraying people who would spend lifetimes pursuing vengeance. Refusing cooperation meant remaining perpetually vulnerable, forever looking over his shoulder, never trusting safety. He had retreated into paralysis, choosing neither path because both led toward destruction. But Marcus's approach offered something unprecedented: acknowledgement that perfect safety didn't exist, coupled with genuine respect for his autonomy and accepting risk. "The people I worked for," Brennan began slowly, each word carrying the weight of difficult emergence. "They're not just criminals. They're networked globally, they have resources beyond what most people can imagine, and they're patient. Talking to federal agents means I'm marking myself for eventual elimination. Protection programs are temporary. Identities get compromised. Someone always talks, someone always trades information for advantage, and eventually the wrong person learns where you are." Marcus nodded, not diminishing these concerns with false reassurance. "You're right. The risks are real, and I won't insult you by pretending otherwise. But consider this. You're already trapped. Staying silent doesn't provide safety. It just prolongs the moment before consequences arrive. These organizations don't forget about threats. You're living evidence of their vulnerability, and that makes you permanent liability regardless of whether you talk." Brennan's hands clenched, knuckles whitening. "So I'm dead either way. That's your argument?" "No," Marcus said firmly. "My argument is that you can be dead and meaningless, or you can be at risk but instrumental in dismantling something genuinely evil. The outcome might be the same, but the journey there, the purpose you serve, that's entirely different. You have information that can save lives, hundreds of lives, maybe thousands. People who will never know your name, but who will continue existing because funding for terrorist operations dried up. That's not nothing, David. That matters." The use of his first name, spoken with quiet intensity rather than manipulation, cut through Brennan's defenses. For 3 years, he had been a case file, a reluctant witness, a problem requiring solution. Marcus spoke to him as a person facing genuine dilemma, deserving serious consideration. The respect in that approach accomplished what coercion never could. It activated Brennan's own sense of agency and moral responsibility. "If I do this," Brennan said carefully, "I want something in return. Not money, not promises about protection. I want honesty. If the networks discover where I am, if the risk becomes immediate, I want someone to tell me directly rather than maintaining comfortable fictions about security. Can you promise that?" Marcus considered the request, recognizing its wisdom. Brennan wasn't asking for impossible guarantees. He was requesting the dignity of truth, even when truth was harsh. "Yes," Marcus replied. "I can promise that. You'll know what we know, when we know it. No comfortable lies, no false reassurances. Just honest assessment of risk and circumstance." Brennan stood, pacing his small cell once more, but this time his movement carried different energy. Not trapped anxiety, but active consideration. He stopped at the small window looking out on the prison yard, watching inmates circulate through their routines, each trapped in their own particular circumstances. "I kept these networks running for 11 years, he said quietly. Moved money, disguised transactions, created structures that made dirty funds look legitimate. I told myself I was just doing technical work, that I wasn't responsible for what the money funded. But I knew. I always knew." Marcus remained silent, recognizing confession when it emerged. 8 months ago, I read a news article about a bombing in Brussels. Brennan continued, his voice thick with suppressed emotion. 43 people died, including 11 children on a school trip. The article mentioned that investigators were tracking funding sources. I knew exactly where that money came from. I had processed the transfers 6 months earlier. Those children died because I was good at my job. He turned to face Marcus directly, his expression carrying the weight of moral reckoning finally confronted rather than avoided. "I'll tell you everything I know. Every account, every contact, every structural detail I can remember. Not because I trust your system to protect me. I don't. But because staying silent makes me complicit in whatever happens next, and I'm done being complicit." The confession Marcus had pursued for 21 months emerged not from manipulation or coercion, but from Brennan's own moral clarity, finally cutting through paralyzing fear. The transformation. Thank you for journeying through this narrative of unexpected strength and human complexity. If this story has moved you, please subscribe, share, and reflect on the quiet heroes in your own life who demonstrate courage through patience rather than force. Your engagement ensures more people discover these lessons in transformative resilience. 3 months after David Brennan's confession, Marcus Webb completed his prison sentence and walked through Oak Ridge Federal Penitentiary's main gates into crisp autumn morning. Special Agent Sarah Chen waited in an unmarked vehicle, her expression carrying professional satisfaction mixed with something harder to define, perhaps respect for someone who had executed one of the most unusual intelligence operations she had supervised. The information Brennan provided had proven comprehensive and devastating to the financial networks he described. 17 major accounts were frozen, 23 individuals arrested across 6 countries, and funding streams disrupted sufficiently to dismantle 3 separate operational cells planning attacks on civilian targets. The intelligence community considered it one of the most significant counterterrorism victories in recent years, achieved not through surveillance technology or military force but through patient, human-centered trust building. "Brennan's being relocated under new identity," Chen informed Marcus as they drove away from the facility. "Maximum protection, new documentation, complete severance from previous life. He's requested that you be told he appreciated your honesty, and that he hopes whatever you do next involves less lying and more of whatever you actually are." Marcus smiled at that assessment. "What I actually am is tired," he replied. 21 months of performing invisibility takes its toll. I'm ready to be myself again, whoever that turns out to be. Chen glanced at him curiously. "You're being offered early retirement with full pension. The operation's success earned you significant credit within the agency. You could walk away completely, start a civilian life, never look back." But Marcus shook his head, recognizing something about himself that the prison experience had clarified, rather than obscured. "I'm good at this kind of work. Not the violence, not the confrontation. The patience, the observation, understanding human psychology, and finding ways to reach people who have stopped trusting conventional approaches. There's value in that capability. I'd rather keep using it than pretend I'm suited for peaceful domesticity." They drove in silence for several miles, processing the implications of choices made and paths selected. Marcus watched the landscape flow past the vehicle's windows, noticing how different freedom felt after extended confinement. Not the explosive joy he might have anticipated, but rather quiet appreciation for simple autonomy, the ability to choose direction, timing, purpose. What about Rizzo? Chen asked, breaking the comfortable silence. The reports suggested you two reached some kind of understanding. Marcus nodded, remembering their final interaction before his release. Tommy Rizzo had approached him during the last week, extending a handshake that carried genuine respect rather than performative hierarchy. You taught me something, Rizzo had said. That real strength isn't about who you can dominate. It's about when you choose not to. I'm going to remember that. The transformation hadn't been complete. Rizzo remained who he fundamentally was. But seeds planted in careful soil sometimes germinated in unexpected ways. Perhaps years from now, in some other context, that lesson about calibrated response and strategic restraint would resurface and alter a choice that otherwise would have led toward violence. Perhaps not. Marcus had learned not to need visible confirmation of every positive influence. I think about prison differently now, Marcus told Chen. We treat it as purely punitive, places where we contain people we've judged dangerous or criminal. But it's also where human complexity reveals itself without the masks society usually requires. Rizzo, Brennan, dozens of others I encountered. They were all just people managing fear and seeking purpose in circumstances that stripped away pretense. Maybe the real work isn't changing people, but helping them recognize capabilities they didn't know they possessed. Chen considered this perspective, recognizing its implications for how intelligence work might evolve. You're suggesting we need more patient approaches, more willingness to invest time in relationship building rather than extracting immediate results. I'm suggesting, Marcus replied, that the hardest problems don't respond to force or pressure. They respond to trust, which requires time and consistency most institutions aren't structured to provide. What I did with Brennan, spending nearly 2 years establishing credibility through sustained action, that's not replicable at scale, but maybe it should be. Maybe we need people willing to become invisible long enough to actually see what others miss. The vehicle merged onto a highway carrying them toward whatever came next. Marcus settled into his seat, feeling the peculiar satisfaction of missions completed and lessons learned through difficulty embraced rather than avoided. His time at Oak Ridge had transformed him in ways he was still discovering, not through dramatic revelation, but through accumulated moments of choice between responding with force or maintaining disciplined restraint. He had entered prison as tactical operative executing assignment. He emerged as something more nuanced, someone who understood that true strength often looked like weakness to observers conditioned to equate power with domination. The janitor everyone ignored had accomplished what conventional authority couldn't, and in doing so had demonstrated that invisibility, patience, and genuine respect for human complexity sometimes achieved what violence and coercion never could. The road stretched ahead, carrying him toward new challenges requiring the particular skills he had refined through 21 months of strategic obscurity. And somewhere behind him, in a protective custody cell then in relocated anonymity, David Brennan was learning that courage sometimes meant trusting someone who had earned it through sustained action rather than empty promises, a lesson that might save lives for years to come. True transformation, Marcus understood, rarely announced itself with thunder. It arrived quietly, built through daily choices that accumulated into character, expressed through moments when power restrained itself rather than expressing dominance. Everyone had ignored the janitor in prison. In that invisibility, he had found a kind of strength most would never recognize but could never match.